So question 9 says, again, find the domain of the function. So again, as we mentioned, the domain of the function begins out as a set of all real numbers. If an x value cannot result in a y value, then the value of x must be removed from the domain. So one thing that, as we said, will create domain restriction is division by zero. Division by zero cannot be calculated as it is undefined. So if you put something in that makes the denominator equal to zero, it will not result in a y value, and therefore it has to be thrown out. So again, if x appears in the denominator, there could be a restriction. What we do is we set the denominator equal to zero, solve for x, and that will, when we get those values, those are the values we're going to exclude from the domain. So if I look at this problem right here, notice that x does appear in the denominator. So there could be a domain restriction. So what we're going to do is we're going to set x squared minus 25 is equal to 0. So when we're solving for x, if we can get this x squared by itself, we can kind of see something here. So if I add a 25 to both sides, in other words, just move the 25 over, I'm going to get x squared is equal to this 25. Because again, if you add a 25 here, they zero out, and 0 plus 25 just is a 25. So if you look at this, again, x represents some number. What can you square that's going to give you 25? So notice that 5 squared does give me 25. So 5 would be a solution. But notice that you can also square a negative. So if we have a negative 5 squared, notice that that also gives me a 25. So there's two things that would make the denominator equal to 0. That would be a 5 or a negative 5. So if I solve this equation right here, we're picking up on x could equal a 5 or a negative 5, or we can write this as plus or minus 5. Or you can write this as 5 comma negative 5, either way. So if I look at this problem, if I put 5 into this formula, so on the top, this is going to be 6 times 5. If we get that answer, that's going to be 30. And then the calculations at the bottom, if I put a 5 in, 5 squared minus 25, that's going to give me a 0. So again, the numerator would be this 30. Hit enter if I want to copy that over. If I divide that by the denominator, which is the 0, if I hit enter, notice that I get a crash. So 5 would make the problem crash. So again, if I want to type this in a little bit differently, since this looks like a fraction, I can use the fraction button. So if I hit alpha F1, oops, I gotta clear this off. So if I hit the alpha F1, number 1 makes a fraction. So if I put 6 times negative 5 in the numerator, since I'm saying x is negative 5, and on the bottom, if I put that negative 5 in parentheses and square it, and then subtract 25, we should also get an error. We get that division error. So that tells me we have to exclude those. So our domain is going to be the set of x's. Oops, they're going to talk about interval notation, not inequalities. So let me try that again. So it may be easier to see this using a number line. So on my number line, the values that we're excluding would be the negative 5 and the 5. So those are going to be where it's open. So our domain is going to be everything else on the number line. So our domain is everything to the left of negative 5. The domain is everything in between negative 5 and 5. And the domain is everything to the right of 5 as well. So using interval notation, what I'm picking up on is there's 3 intervals. So I go from negative infinity to negative 5 is one interval, not including the 5. In union with, we have then negative 5 to 5. That's the next interval. And then in union with, the third interval is from 5 to infinity. So we'd have to put those 3 intervals down as my domain. So it's everything but the negative 5 and the 5. But since they say interval notation, we have to actually write those 3 intervals And we use this union symbol to say combine all three of those intervals together.